Alright, now that we have all our thumbnails done, it's time to choose one and take it on to the next step. So, like I said earlier in the last lecture, I was probably going to go with this one, but I wasn't completely satisfied with it. I don't think there was enough story. I think that this little building back here wasn't big enough. So what I did is I went and I copied and pasted it down here, and I just kind of fixed some things, repainted some things in there, and I painted a person in there, a little bridge going out to this mountain out in the middle of this area. And I enlarged it a little bit. So we're gonna go with this thumbnail right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure I'm selected on my painting layer for my thumbnails, and I'm just gonna use my marquee tool to select around this as close as I can. Copy that, and then I'm gonna come into this canvas right here, which this canvas, by the way, is, if we switch it to inches, it's 11 inches by 5.5 inches with a resolution of 300. So go ahead and hit OK. So just make a canvas about that size, and then we can go ahead and paste that in here. And then using my transform tool, I'm just going to go ahead and enlarge the side so it's touching either side of my canvas. Like that. Now what we can do is we can either crop this so it cuts off the top like we have in our thumbnail, or we can just paint it like this and then decide whether we want to crop it later, which I'm going to go with that option. Alright, so let me just bring that out just a little bit more so we don't have that white edge. Alright, great. So what we want to do first is we want to go ahead and do a sketch that we can use as a guide. Now this sketch is going to be a little bit more detailed than what we have going on here. This was just to help us decide where everything will go, the shapes and stuff like that, and also the values. But it's just, this thumbnail is a guide just like this sketch we're about to do is a guide. So I'm going to go ahead and select kind of a blue color. It doesn't really matter what color you use for this. I'm just going to use blue because I think it looks nice to sketch things in blue. And I'll bring my brush size down. And I'm going to choose a brush like this. Actually, let's do a hard round opacity brush like that. And what we want to do is we just want to start sketching everything out. So for example, I want to work on this tree. So there might be some things that I want to change about this. And this can be a pretty sketchy drawing. It doesn't have to look super pretty or perfect or anything like that. And so with this sketch, we can kind of start to explain some of these forms in here. So for example, maybe this tree kind of twists around like this. That's pretty cool looking. I'm gonna go add another branch out here. And then maybe we'll have some roots down here. So this is a time where we want to start drawing that in. Now this is a cool way to draw roots, just kind of drawing these coils coming around like this. And then we can just kind of follow them with a line like that. And it just kind of creates that form for us automatically. Maybe there's kind of some rocks out here. They'll probably mostly get covered by plants by the end, but that's okay. Maybe we can do some interesting looking rocks like this. Oh, and I don't know why, but I guess on a different layer, these people in the bridge didn't transfer out. So I'm going to go ahead and grab these layers right here. Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and drag these layers in here then, and drop them in. Let's go ahead and merge them. Put them underneath our drawing, and then we can go ahead and resize them. Go ahead and hit enter. I'm going to go back to my image to see about how big they should be. So yeah, that looks about good. Alright. Come back to my drawing layer. Draw this bridge in. We really want it to just disappear out to the vanishing point. Now that bridge might not look completely correct yet. We can come back and work on that. Let's go ahead and kind of draw this guy in. Might be kind of cool if I have like some lanterns out here on this trail that could be kind of lit up or something like that. I mean, it'll be a daylight scene, so you might not see them very well, but that's okay. And we got our mountains back here. Right, great. So that sketch is looking pretty good. So now what we want to do is we want to start creating the individual layers. Now, I'm not going to create them all at one time because I want to start explaining to you how we're going to be creating this by using some photo reference to use as texture throughout this image. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer. And what we're going to do is let's go ahead and let's drop our blue down. The color right now doesn't really actually matter that much. It's just so we can kind of see a little bit better. So we want a darker blue, so it kind of stands out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I will fill in the shape of this tree. So anywhere the roots are, just anything like that. I'm even going to go ahead and grab more of a hard edge brush, a solid brush so there's no pressure, opacity, sensitivity. And we're just going to fill the shape in. Alright, great. That looks pretty good. I could also probably actually go in here, find a branch brush like I used earlier, and maybe put that branch back in there. So let me find that branch brush. I think that's it right there. Actually, I think it might be the other one. That looks like it. So go ahead and move my brush size up, and I'm just going to repaint this brush back in there like that. Maybe we could do another one. I'm going to come into my brush settings and I can go ahead and rotate this brush around like that. Maybe flip it along the y-axis. Maybe put one in right there or something. Maybe try one here. Alright, that's kind of interesting looking. Oh, and I missed this branch right here, so I'll switch back to my tapered brush. Paint this branch in right there. Alright, so the purpose of this layer is it's going to be a clipping layer mask. So this is going to be the shape of this tree. And so what we'll do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to come into a file that I gave you. So you should be able to download this file with the drawing that I also gave you for this lecture. But this file right here, the assets file, is full of a bunch of royalty-free images. Now, I'm going to leave out these PNG files just because I'm not 100% sure if I can give those away, but these images that I'm going to be using throughout this, I put my assets in here for you guys to use along with me, because these are from a website called pexels.com. So as we begin adding all this detail in here, You can find your own images and textures and stuff from this website. Whoops. From this website, which is called pexels.com. And it's a bunch of royalty-free images. I'm not sure why that keeps coming off, but anyways, so on that website you can find a bunch of royalty-free images, which is where I find all my images, and you can use those as textures in your pictures, and I'll show you how we do that right now. So what we want to do is we want to come into our Finder, or if you're on a Windows, I guess you'll just come into your folder and find the image you want to use. In this case, we are going to use, let's use this tree image right here because we want to emulate the tree trunk. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that onto my Photoshop file so that way it automatically puts it here into my file. Go ahead and hit enter. And I'm also going to go ahead and try to erase it, and that will automatically rasterize it for me, meaning that I can transform it or erase it and stuff like that. Basically modify it. Depending on what software you're using, you might not even have to do that. And then next what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm using my marquee tool, I'm going to go ahead and select this tree trunk. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Shift Invert, or I, hit delete, so that way we can delete that outside selection. And then what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and I can drag this over onto my tree, right click, make sure you right click on the actual title, and then create clipping layer mask. So now it's a clipping layer mask for the shape of our tree. And then this is a really good case of where you would want to use the transform tool or the warp tool. So if I use the transform tool and I right click and I come to warp, what I can do is I can go ahead and I can warp this image more to the shape of my tree. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hit enter. So it's not warped perfectly, and that's okay. We just wanted to get the basic curve in there, because what this is this is just texture. This is just to help us get the image moving along. If I wanted to, what I could do is I could go ahead and use my stamp tool. Actually, we haven't gone over the stamp tool, so I'm not going to use that. What we can do is we can go ahead and just copy and paste this layer. So select the layer, copy and paste it. Drag it down so it becomes a clipping layer mask, and I can just drag that down into my roots, like that. Oops. And then I can just go ahead and erase the areas that I don't want. I'm going to get a soft edge brush for my eraser, and I can just kind of erase this away to help blend it in. But that'll just add some nice texture. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste another one. Turn it into a clipping layer mask. And I can drag that, oops. I can drag that over. I might have to use my arrow keys because I can't find it. I'm not really sure where that is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and merge these layers together so they're all one layer. Then I'll copy and paste that, drag it down. But you should be getting the idea. Basically, you can take these textures, turn them into clipping layer masks, and use them to create these nice textures in your paintings. And then what you can do is you can go ahead, create a new clipping layer mask. I'm going to drag that to the top. And then you can take some color. So I'm going to take like this dark color, for example, and I'm just going to paint that in. So let's use a soft edge brush to do this. You can see it'll paint in on all these branches as well. And I can kind of just shade that side in just like that. And then I can go ahead and select one of these other colors and paint on this outside area, just like that. And if we wanted to, we can go ahead and merge our texture layers together, and then we can just go ahead and bring up an adjustment layer for it, or adjustments for that specific layer. And we can do things like we can try to play with the coloring, the hue. We can also play with the saturation. So I'm going to bring the saturation down a little bit and the lightness, so it'll get a little bit darker and a little bit desaturated. Go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to do the same thing for this color layer we just did. So bring down the brightness and the saturation, but especially that saturation. I don't think we want it to be that green. Maybe we can bring that brightness back up a little bit. Go ahead and hit OK. But you can see we're already starting to get a good base for our texture. All right, let's go over some more techniques that we can use. So another thing we can do is we can use the color sampling tool to create some really nice leaf effects. So the way we will do that is we'll go File, Open, and then we need to open an image. Let's open this one right here. So we have these leaves here. This works best when you have some leaves with a dark background, so that way you can differentiate between all the individual leaves. Then we'll just come up to Filter, or Select, sorry, and then Color Range. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just select the color I want. So I'm gonna select that color right there. And as you can see in our preview, it shows us what colors we have selected. All the white areas are the areas we have selected. And then if I go ahead and I switch over to the plus eyedropper right there, it's gonna make it so I can add more colors. So I can select a few other colors in there. All right, that's pretty good. I'll go ahead and hit OK. And now you can see it automatically selects all of those. And I can go ahead and hit Command C for copy, or if you're in a Mac, it would be Control C. But either way, just go ahead and copy that, and then go ahead and paste that into your file in here. And you can see that it kind of cuts out a lot of those leaves, and we can use that as texture. So if I bring down the size like this, I can go ahead and kind of overlay that over the tree. Go ahead and hit Enter, and then using my eraser tool, I can just go ahead and erase some of that out. But it just creates some automatic texture and leaves and stuff in there. And by using these techniques, it's really useful. It makes painting go by so much faster, especially when you're painting actual environments. Let's go ahead and zoom in there. We could go ahead and bring up its hue and saturation layer controls, and I'm gonna go ahead, don't want to desaturate it. I'm gonna put this all back at 0. Whoops, we don't want that one at 0. Whoops, I'm just gonna undo that. All right, let's try that again. So bring up our controls, and then I can go ahead and I can play with the color of it. If I wanted to, I could change this from master to something like yellow, and I can go ahead and bring up the saturation of the yellow to just make that stand out a little bit more. And then I could come back to master, maybe just desaturate all of that overall, and darken it a little bit, so that way it doesn't stand out too much. Go ahead and hit OK. And now you can just start layering together these textures and also paint on top of that. So you still want to make sure that this is an actual painting, and it's going to allow you to get textures in there much quicker. So let's have a look at one more example. So let's go ahead and put all these in a folder. It's really important that when you do this that you keep everything nice and organized, otherwise it can get very confusing, because you're going to have a lot of layers going on with a painting like this. So I'm going to go ahead, put these all in a group folder, and we can call this Right Tree. All right, great. So all that is in one folder now, so I can keep that nice and organized, and I can just open that up if I want to pull something out of there or change something. So now we're going to do something else. So let's go ahead, let's add a new layer above our drawing. Then I'm going to go ahead and just select another dark blue or something like that. Then using my brush tool, make sure you're using a hard-edged brush. We can go ahead and fill in the shape of kind of our mountains and rocks and stuff in the foreground. I guess you wouldn't really call it a mountain, but our foreground area. So this is going to really be covered up by a bunch of plants and stuff, so the shape isn't super important. You do want to cover the basic shape that we've drawn here, but the profile of it is not going to be incredibly important. what's important is that we just get the bulk of it in there. I'm going to go ahead and ignore these rocks for now. We can come back and paint those on their own layer. All right, great. So let's go ahead and let's create a new layer, or actually let's just go ahead and bring a photo in here. So I'm going to come into my folder. Oops. All right, come into my folder and let's look for something we want to use. So in this case, let's go ahead and let's find something that has some rock on it that we can use as a rock texture. So maybe something like this will look good. Go ahead, whoops. Let's go ahead and drag that in there. And then we can go ahead and resize that if we want right now before we really do anything. I think that looks good. And then let's go ahead and create this into a clipping layer mask. So I'll right click, create clipping layer mask. And there we go. So we already have incorporated some beautiful rock textures in there. And it took like almost no time. It's so fast, and that's why this technique is such a cool thing, is bringing textures in here really allows you to get these really cool textures in there. I know it looks kind of funny right now, but as you watch me paint this, you'll see how I'll slowly transform it and tweak it and paint it into what I want it to look like. Another reason why you want to keep everything on separate layers is so you can tweak the colors and adjust them and the contrast levels and all of that, because that way you can really control every aspect of your image and make sure that all the colors and everything are working together. All right. So now what we can do is we can go ahead, let's bring up our controls. Maybe we can desaturate it a little bit. And let's darken it a little bit as well. Something like that. Go ahead and hit OK. All right, great. And then what we can do is we can go ahead, let's bring in another photo. So I'm going to come into my folder. Let's grab something with a lot of shrubbery. So maybe something like this one. Go ahead and drag that in there. I'm gonna go ahead and bring up the size right now while I'm at it. Go ahead and hit enter. And then let's go ahead and drag that beneath this one so it becomes an automatic clipping layer mask. And the reason why we drug this over the top of this one is because what we're gonna do is we're gonna get some text, just a little bit of texture out of this one. So I'm going to go ahead and use my eraser tool. Or another thing we can do is we can actually just go ahead and create a clipping mask for this specific layer. So this isn't going to be a clipping layer mask for the layer beneath it. It's going to be a clipping layer mask just for this layer. So we'll go ahead and hit that icon. And so now what we can do, if you remember, is we can use our brush tool, and if we paint with black, it'll erase it out. And if we paint with white, so if I switch over to white, it paints it back in. So that way we don't ever actually lose our image. We can still always manipulate it, erase it out, and bring it back. And this is just really good because when you do things in digital painting, you want to make sure that you can always reverse what you've done pretty easily. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to black, and maybe I'll switch over to a different brush, more of a soft edge brush. And I just want to leave some of this up here at the top of these rocks. It's kind of cool leaving that waterfall in there, but for our image, that's not going to make a whole lot of sense. But you can see it just kind of adds some plants on top of those rocks. All right, great. So even though this doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, by darkening it, controlling it, and then painting on top of it and adding a bunch of other plants and stuff, that's really going to change things up. Now, one last thing I want to go over before I really start diving into this painting is I want to show you how using PNG or transparent backgrounds of things like tree branches and plants and stuff like that is super useful for paintings like this as well. So like I said, I didn't include these in your asset pack because not all of them are necessarily, I'm not necessarily allowed to give them away, but they're really easy to find. If you just go online and you search PNG, the letters, and then search for just things like branches, leaves, all kinds of stuff like that, you're going to find many different things that you can use for free. But basically what we can do with it is I can go ahead and select one like this one. I'm gonna go ahead and drop it in here. And you can see it has a transparent background, which is perfect for what we're doing. I'm gonna go ahead and maybe leave the size about where it's at. Go ahead and hit enter. And then I'm gonna go ahead and drag this into my right tree folder. And let's go ahead, let's find that layer. Where'd it go? Oh, it's right there. Okay, so that layer is on the very top of all our other layers, which is perfect. We want it to be above our tree branches, so it kind of overhangs over them. But you can see I can kind of just drag that in there, and I can drag a whole bunch in there. And then just using my controls, I can just go ahead and adjust it. I can darken it, I can desaturate it, maybe brighten it up a little bit more, and have it really desaturated, stuff like that. I could even change the colors of the leaves a little bit more if I wanted to. There's a lot of different things you can do to adjust it to make it fit into the image a little bit more. Alright, so those are all the basic techniques that I will be using throughout this painting. So I'm just basically taking shapes that I've painted out and then adding layers on top of that, a texture with clipping layer masks, and also color clipping layer masks. So I can adjust the colors, adjust the textures, and then I'll also be painting a few things on top of it, such as leaf brushes. So if we come into my brushes, I might be using leaves, so maybe something like this. Let me come onto a layer that I can actually paint on. There we go. So I'll probably be painting with leaf brushes, something like this, throughout the painting. So those are the basic techniques that I'll be using. So what I want you to do now is I want you to just sit back and relax and just watch me paint this painting. And you're gonna learn a lot from it. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, that just about brings us to the end of this lecture. So you should have been able to follow along pretty closely with what I was doing, even though that was being time-lapsed, but you should have seen what I was doing. If you have any questions about what I was doing, make sure that you ask your questions in the Q&A section of the course. But real quick, let's just review kind of what my thought process was. So the first thing that I want to point out is you'll notice that this tree a little ways into the painting got flipped. And the reason for that is because I just thought that it would look better if it was going in that direction. That way it was kind of more framing the image rather than kind of just jabbing into the center of our image. So that's why I had it curve out that way instead of the other way I had it drawn before. And you saw that it was just a very long process. This is going to take you a little bit of time. This painting took me probably about 3 hours, and it just takes time to layer in all these different pieces of paint and also these images like the leaves, all that good stuff. So this is just going to take time. Now, one last thing I want to talk about before we end is the adjustments you can make to your image. So once you have your image all painted and everything, it's a good idea to adjust your image. So the way we can do that is just by coming up to the very top, and then we're going to have an adjustment layer. We're going to add a hue and saturation, and what we can do with this is we can go ahead and we can just kind of adjust the saturation if we wanted to. So if I wanted that to be a little bit more vibrant, I could bring that up. So it might be looking a little bit too desaturated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that up in saturation just a tiny bit. And then we could also create another one of these, and we'll make it a contrast layer. Maybe I can bring that contrast up a little bit. See how that looks? Now it's a good idea to look at your composition and image from far away and see how it reads. And if it reads well from far away, then that's good. That's what you want. And then from there you can add in all your detail. But it's important that you constantly are zooming out. So you might have noticed that I was zooming out a lot throughout that painting. Now I think you could actually probably do without the contrast. So we'll just leave on, whoops, let's go ahead and completely delete that. So I'm just going to leave the hue and saturation adjustment on there. Now another thing we can do is I kind of started adding these rays of light in here. And the way we can do that is by using color dodge layers. So let me show you how this is done. So we're going to create a new one because I want this to actually be a little bit more warm, a little bit more red, so that we can bring that warmth into our image. So I created a new layer on top of all of my layers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just select a red basically. So maybe something like that. And we can always change the color. We'll see if we like it or not. And then we want to grab a soft edge brush. Like that. And if we go ahead and we change our color mode or our layer mode to color dodge, so right there, color dodge, you'll see that when we paint on this, it creates this really cool effect. Basically everything kind of absorbs this color and its value. So what we want to do is we just want to basically kind of add a little bit of warmth in there. And maybe what I'll do is I'm going to come down here, and I have this other one right here. I'm going to turn that off so I can't see it. And then come back up, and let's see if that helps at all. We can add a little bit of warmth up here as well. All right, great. Now that might be overdoing it a little bit, so all we have to do is just bring the saturation down just a little bit, like that. And that just adds a lot more warmth into our image. We just want a touch of that warmth in there. All right, perfect. I'm gonna actually turn my layer back on that I turned off down here, my other light ray. Now I'm going to keep that in there. Let's go ahead and zoom out and see how that looks. Great, I think that looks pretty good. All right, I think this painting is done. The last thing to do is just go ahead and sign it. Even though I designed this, go ahead, sign it with your name, I don't mind. So I'm probably going to just select this color here and then just lighten it up and desaturate it, so something like that. Then I'll just go ahead and grab a good brush for signing, so something maybe like that. That looks good. Bring my brush size down. Then maybe I'll use my transform tool and just shrink that down a bit. Maybe bring down the opacity so it's not so dark. All right, great. So there we go. One finished landscape, environment, painting that came from our own imagination. So if you followed along with me, that's great. Go ahead and post your results in the Q&A section of the course, and if you have any questions, please ask them. And also, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and, even if you didn't paint this one with me, go ahead and walk through the whole process that I do, where you start with thumbnails and paint all the value thumbnails and figure out what your composition is going to look like. And then once you figure out which one you want, go ahead and take that, turn it into a sketch, adjust the sketch as you need to, enlarge things, whatever you need to do, and then go ahead and use the techniques I taught you by bringing in textures and then painting on top of that, and make sure that you keep everything on layers and keep everything in separate folders. So I got a little bit messy here at the end. If you download this Photoshop folder, I'll let you look through all of my different files and stuff, but you'll see that some of it is pretty organized and some of it is kind of messy, but for the most part, I tried to keep all the main things in their own folder. So you can see I can turn off entire sections in layers. There's our sketch. All right. Thanks for watching this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next one.